Hey there, I'm G, and welcome to the next level, and you're diving into the treasure chest, the series where I review some of the more rare and uncommon games in my collection, see what they're all about, and give some final thoughts on their place in history. I love video games. I love anime. I love video games and anime. However, anime licensed video games can be kind of a tricky endeavor. While they generally are faithful to the source material, they can be a real wild card when it comes to quality. When it comes to me and anime, I tend to lean more towards the old school, the kind of shows that I grew up with. Shows like Ronin Warriors, aka Samurai Troopers, Cowboy Bebop, and one of my favorite anime series ever, Outlaw Star. I wonder why Outlaw Star never got a video game, huh? Maybe it's because the Bebop games were bad? Possibly. But if there's an anime series that I still love popping in every now and then, and in my opinion still holds up really well today, it's the cyberpunk classic, Ghost in the Shell. Boasting a killer storyline and characters, beautiful animation, and one hell of an ending, Ghost in the Shell and its follow-up TV series, Standalone Complex, will always have a special place in my heart. And I know I'm gonna catch some heat for saying this, but I actually kinda like the live-action film. And I'll just leave it at that. But if someone had to ask me about an anime licensed game series that really sticks out among the rest, it's definitely Ghost in the Shell, particularly the PlayStation 1 game of the same name, which has risen from obscurity and is now starting to become a rarity among collectors. So you know what that means. It's time to check in with the Major, control a kick-ass Fuchikoma, and jack into today's game out of the treasure chest, THQ's Ghost in the Shell on the PlayStation 1. Ghost in the Shell was released in 1997 in Japan and North America, and in the following year in PAL territories. Sony Computer Entertainment published the game themselves in Japan and in PAL, while THQ handled the release in North America. It was developed by Exact, which might be a familiar name for PlayStation fans, as it was the same development team that made the iconic Jumping Flash series of games, later renditions of Intelligent Cube, aka Kurushi, and the criminally underrated Covert Ops Nuclear Dawn. This wouldn't be the only Ghost in the Shell game to come out, as it was followed up on the PlayStation 2 and the PlayStation Portable with games based on the TV series Standalone Complex, released by Bandai themselves. The PS2 title, where you control Major Kusanagi in a third-person action title, was a flawed but enjoyable game with excellent production values. While the PSP game, well, it was ambitious, but the less said about it, the better. So to go from a cutesy first-person platformer like Jumping Flash to an intense action game based on one of my favorite animes ever, sign me up. Let's see how well they did. Right away, you're treated with a stunning animated introduction sequence that was done by the same animation studio behind the anime, who I also found out was the team behind the intro sequence for Sonic Riders. Nice. But yeah, that intro, it's incredible. I remember seeing it for the first time in one of the official PlayStation Magazine's demo discs as a kid, and I knew I had to have the game. And dig that soundtrack. That is how you pump someone up to play a game, but we'll talk more about that later. There are more animated cutscenes as you play through the game as well. You're one of the rookie members of Public Security Section 9, a security and intelligence team that's made up of you and familiar members from the anime, including Chief Aramaki, Bato, Togusa, Ishikawa, Saito, and of course, Major Motoko Kusanagi. Let's be real, folks. If you were younger when Ghost in the Shell was big and you didn't have a crush on the Major, I don't know what to say to you. And all the original voice cast reprise their roles here. I always enjoyed the English dub for Ghost in the Shell, and they do a pretty fantastic job here. No, you can't switch it to Japanese, unfortunately. Before each chapter, you're briefed by the team on your mission objectives in these detailed map sequences, and before you know it, it's time to pilot a Fuchikoma. You know, the adorable little red think tanks with even more adorable voices that can destroy buildings in a single bound? Once you take command, you'll notice how smooth it feels to control your Fuchikoma. Fans of Jumping Flash will most likely adapt to the game right away, but will immediately notice just how fast the game moves and how much more responsive the controls feel. You basically do all of your forward and rotational movements with the D-pad and strafe with the shoulder buttons. The X button jumps, while the square and circle buttons are the machine gun and grenade attack buttons. And that's it. Simple, yet addictive. You have an unlimited amount of machine gun ammo, as well as lock-on missiles, which you activate by holding down the square button and letting you go after you lock on. A meter will appear on the bottom of the screen telling you how many missiles have locked on, and you can let go when you have the amount desired. This is similar to how you use your lock-on weapon in games like Panzer Dragoon, but you have to time it properly or you'll lose it and try again. And be ready to master the fine art of using missiles and strafing behind obstacles for cover, because you will need it. It starts off easy, but the enemies do ramp up in tenacity fairly quickly. Strafing to maneuver around tight spaces and avoiding enemy fires is essential to survival, so get used to it ASAP. Grenades are limited, however. You can only carry up to 3 at a time, but there are bonus grenades hidden within the stages that you can find, as well as hidden health packs. But back to the controls, specifically my favorite part of controlling the Fuchikoma, the wall walking. Your Fuchikoma can attach to virtually any wall or ceiling to move around in, which can be used to access hidden areas or to get a sneak attack on the enemies. It's almost seamless when you're transitioning from surface to surface, and hardly ever feels awkward. It's just so satisfying to be on top of a building or a high ledge and then dive down and take out some enemies, or to snipe them with missiles from above. You can also use your wall attachment in ways that no level feels the same way twice, and in some cases you'll need to use that ability to solve puzzles and to climb your way up in certain areas. The game has you controlling the Fuchikoma in a third-person perspective, but will switch to a first-person perspective depending on the camera and the environment. Which the camera is never really a problem, which I know tends to be an issue with third-person games at that time, but yeah, Exact got it really right here for the most part. Or you can press the select button to stay in first-person view. I don't recall playing that many first-person games in the PS1 at this time that moves as smoothly as this game does, so it was really impressive and still holds up well today. The graphics might not be the lavish and super colorfulness that came from Jumping Flash, but it's very faithful to the anime, super detailed, stylish, and moves smoothly. It definitely captures the look and feel with the cyberpunk environments and the warehouses, each one looking better than the last. In some areas, if it's too dark, the game will turn on night vision for you, and the effect does what it needs to do without making you feel queasy, at least not for me when I played it. The game moves super fast without incurring much slowdown at all. The only times that I really noticed slowdown were in the boss battles, when things get really intense. But before we get into the stages of the game, let's talk about the training mode real quick. I definitely recommend going through the course before taking on the main game. It does a good job of helping you learn the controls while mastering moving from surface to surface and giving you a sense of urgency that you will need in the later levels. If there's a downside I could say to the training course is that they don't really explain how the controls of the Fuchikoma work. You're just kind of thrown in and expected to take out the targets within the time limit. So it's really more of a testing range than a training mode, but I still recommend going through it at least once before starting the story. And depending on your rank when you complete the course, you unlock even more cutscenes, and they certainly let you know if you suck.
You'll have to prove to us that you've got some guts.
Some of these are actually pretty funny.
We did it! We're covered with injuries and racking up experience! Promotions! Promotions! Promotions!
Aww, aren't the Fuchikomas such adorable devices of mass destruction? To me, Ghost in the Shell's greatest strength is that there's never a dull moment in the game. There is always pulse-pounding action for you to sink your teeth into. The stages feel so large and expansive while staying compact. And that may not make much sense at first, but let me explain. While the areas themselves are small, since your Fuchikoma can attach to virtually any surface, it makes the stages feel more open without slowing the game down. I cannot express just how much fun it is to traverse through the sides of the buildings or even on the ceilings of the corridors, figuring out new ways to take out enemies. The whole game has a fast-paced arcadey feel to it, encouraging you to complete your missions quickly, but are open enough to encourage you to explore to find targets and hidden power-ups. Stage 3 is a great example of this, as you have to take out several targets quickly before the time limit runs out, and when you move on to the next sector, you get a time extension. Targets are not limited to being on the ground, so you have to rapidly survey the entire area. Look up, look down, look everywhere. Look in places that you wouldn't even think to find because there may be a target hidden there. I love this stage, but it also can be frustrating as one of the sectors has a target that's in a very clever spot that can eat up your time if you aren't diligent enough. I won't spoil it, but once you find it and clear the mission, it's so relieving. Again, it's that tension that keeps the game's energy up. And the final stage where you're climbing the tower, that is really something to behold, but we'll get to that. As the story progresses, the gameplay style switches it up on you, bringing lots of variety. I absolutely love the on-rail shooter stages, especially this one in the river where you have to shoot down the boats while dodging laser rails. So damn cool. Or the city stage where you're chasing down an enemy that uses thermal camouflage. Not only is this stage marvelous to look at, but the boss fight in this level, ooh, it is a lot of fun. Which leads me to the next thing I love about Ghost in the Shell, the boss fights. Every one of them are massive, whether they are large tanks that take advantage of the screen-filling attacks or more nimble assassins like the Cityscape boss. Battling each one of them takes a lot of practice because they can take quite a bit to take down and are very tough. The Stage 2 boss alone in the sewer took me forever to get past as a kid, but as I mentioned before, strafing is the name of the game. And the final boss, especially when you get to its final form, is just wonderful. No spoilers here, folks, you have to see it for yourself. All the bosses are blasts to take down, especially with the beats of the pumping soundtrack, which leads me to my last factor of what makes Ghost in the Shell so great, the soundtrack. I'm actually a really big fan of electronic music, and Ghost in the Shell soundtrack is just wonderful as it gets your heart racing with bumping electronic beats throughout the entire game. The music has a bit of a Ken Ishii vibe, and at first I thought to myself, man, whoever is the composer of this game really must have been a fan of some of the hot techno artists of that time, until I learned that the soundtrack is actually licensed. Filled with exclusive tracks by real EDM artists from all over the world, such as Dave Angel, Hardfloor, and Scan X, the entire soundtrack is just magnificent. Probably the one that surprised me by their contribution the most is Westbam. I really like Westbam, and after hearing their banger of a song in the Stage 2 corridors, I can totally hear their trademark sound. Again, can't stress how good the soundtrack is, folks, and it's so great that I hope to own the physical soundtrack one day. It truly is outstanding. But as much of an excellent game Ghost in the Shell is, there are a few unfortunate negatives to it. As much as I've said that strafing is the name of the game, attacking with missiles is just as important. However, sometimes in the heat of battle when you're trying to lock on missiles to attack the enemy, the cooldown time after varies. So you might think that you're holding down the button to lock on another set of missiles after you've set out some, and you're dodging attacks only to find out that you're doing nothing at all, sometimes leaving you vulnerable. You have to time the missiles of your meter just right, because the timing of it can be the difference between life and death in a boss fight. Second, the non-target enemies in the stages do respawn. Respawning enemies isn't really an issue for me as the most part, especially as a retro gamer, but sometimes they can respawn out of nowhere and catch you off guard. Again, not a huge problem, but it can be annoying at times. Keeping your life bar up is essential because you'll need all the HP you can muster for the boss fights. But Ghost in the Shell's biggest problem has to be how punishing the game is when you die. You only have one life in the game, and when you die, you go all the way back to the beginning of the chapter. Die during a boss fight? Nope, it's back to the beginning. Almost getting that last target before the time runs out and you die? Nope, it's back to the beginning. Sure, you can save your game in between chapters, but it still is a bit of a pain to have to retreat through the whole level to get another chance at the boss. But the largest example of this is in the final chapter, where you're climbing the bit of the tower, when you have to navigate your way through the tower utilizing your wall climbing skills and even some tricky platforming to make your way to the final boss. Unfortunately, the game doesn't clearly tell you what ledges you can hang onto and which ones will drop you off when you try to attach or jump from, leading to many instant deaths. Like this jump right here, this freaking jump. I tried so many times racking my brain as a kid trying to figure out how to make this jump. Even I can have my Fuchikoma at the very tiptoe edge of the ledge, I just come up short and fall over and over again. It wasn't until by random that I figured out by holding down both strafe buttons and moving forward allows you to dash and make a running jump. Then you can clear the gap. Boy, did I feel dumb. If only the tutorial actually told you that you could do this. I know there's a manual, but still, it would have been nice. This stage is both brilliant and frustrating at the same time, but once you figure it out, it's pretty awesome. And it also has my favorite music track of the entire game by Joey Beltram. Seriously, I could jam to this song all day. But even with its flaws, Ghost in the Shell really is an outstanding experience. It's a challenge for sure, but it's something that action fans, whether you're fans of the anime series or not, would have a blast of a time if they decide to climb in. It's a licensed game that came out at a time when games of its type were real hit or miss titles, but Ghost in the Shell is definitely a hit, and easily falls in as one of my favorite PS1 games of all time. Section 9 out. So, now that you know more about Ghost in the Shell on the PS1, we have to ask the big questions. Is it worth playing today? Without a doubt. If you like nail-biting action games that go outside the box and bring a great challenge, then step up to Ghost in the Shell and don't look back. Even if you've never heard of the anime, it's just an extremely well-built action game that is highly worth your time. Is it worth owning today? Thankfully, the game is not going for too high of a price as of this video. There was a time when it was going for near triple digits, but thankfully at its current rate, it's worth dropping the cash to have it in your collection. But is it an interesting piece of gaming history? Certainly. It's so great to see an anime licensed game of this caliber for its era. It came out of nowhere and left a long-lasting impression on anime fans and PS1 fans alike, and I bet its fame will continue to grow in the years to come. But I want to know, what are your thoughts about Ghost in the Shell? Have you played it? Did it captivate you as much as it did for me? Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts are on the game. And of course, you know what to do if you enjoyed this video. Like, share, subscribe, and you can talk to me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at G2TheNextLevel. Thank you all for watching, keep on gaming, and keep being awesome. I'm G, and until next time, the treasure chest is closed.